On December 26, 1943, at 0615 hours, Captain Shogo Takichi stood beside Kawasaki Ki, 61 manufacturer number 263 at Cape Gloucester Airfield on New Britain, staring at an engine that refused to start. For 8 months this machine had been his shadow in the sky, the aircraft that carried him through dust, heat, monsoon clouds, and battle smoke over New Guinea. 2 white fuselage bands marked it as the mount of the 2nd Chutai Commander. An eagle insignia spread its wings beneath the cockpit. Red 4-pointed stars marked the wing gun ports. In any other moment, this fighter would have looked predatory, coiled, ready to rise. But this morning, its Kawasaki Ha-40 engine merely coughed uselessly as the starter cranked. The propeller spun without life. The engine refused to fire. Takichi was 25 years old, already a seasoned killer with 19 confirmed victories. He had flown the Ki 61 since April, when his unit transitioned from the nimble Nakajima Ki 27 to the heavier, more complex Tony. The 68th Sentai had been the very first Imperial Japanese Army Air Force unit to receive the new fighter. They deployed to Wewak that summer, then bounced between forward airfields as the campaign tightened around them, each month forcing the Japanese farther back. Cape Gloucester Airfield sat on the northwestern tip of New Britain, 230 miles west of Rabaul. It existed to be used, abused, evacuated, and abandoned in the shifting chessboard of the Pacific War. By late December, the tactical situation had collapsed. American forces were preparing for an amphibious invasion. Japanese command ordered all serviceable aircraft evacuated to Rabaul immediately. But Takichi's Ki 61 was not serviceable. The engine had been giving him trouble for weeks. Oil consumption spiked. Cylinder head temperatures ran dangerously hot even at idle. On the previous day's patrol, the engine had run rough at altitude, vibrating in a way that made Takichi's teeth chatter. He landed, reported the issue, and the ground crew worked through the night under lantern light, their tools glinting in the dark as they checked spark plugs, adjusted valve clearances, and tested magnetos. Nothing seemed obviously wrong, yet when dawn came and they swung the propeller again, the engine still refused to fire. Fuel flow or ignition, something fundamental had failed. Without proper tools or spare parts, the men could only shrug. Their hands were empty. At 0640, Takichi made a decision no fighter pilot ever wants to make. He would leave his aircraft behind. He would fly another Ki 61 back to Rabaul. Number 263 would be camouflaged near the runway, covered with palm fronds in the faint hope someone might return for it. But everyone knew what that meant. The Americans were coming, and whatever was left on the ground would be theirs. At 0700 hours, he took off in a different Tony and banked northeast toward Rabaul. Behind him, the mechanics pushed his fighter into a grove of palm trees, draped vegetation over the wings and canopy, and evacuated. For 4 days, the abandoned Ki 61 sat in silence while distant artillery thumped through the humid air. On December 30th, Marines of the 1st Marine Division captured the airfield during the opening phase of Operation Backhander. That afternoon, a patrol pushing through the surrounding vegetation stumbled upon the strange glint of aluminum beneath cut branches. They found the aircraft intact. The fuselage bands still showed through the camouflage. The eagle marking identified it as a command aircraft. It was a prize, the first intact Ki 61 ever captured by Allied forces. Most Japanese aircraft that fell into Allied hands had been shot full of holes, burned, or wrecked. This one was pristine. The armament was installed: 2 Ho-103 12.7 mm machine guns in the forward fuselage, 2 7.7 mm Type 89 guns in the wings. The instrument panel was untouched. Even the engine was complete. American intelligence officers arrived on January 2, 1944, like excited archaeologists who had just uncovered a lost civilization. They photographed every angle, traced every fuel line, measured every wing rib, examined the cooling system, and noted every detail of its construction. The Tony had been a mystery since it first appeared over New Guinea. Some pilots swore it was a German Bf-109. Others insisted it was an Italian Macchi fighter. Now, standing beside this unexpected gift, the Americans finally had proof that it was neither. The engine was a licensed Daimler-Benz DB601, but the airframe was pure Kawasaki. Japanese engineers had built a modern fighter that matched many Western designs, heavy, fast, with self-sealing tanks and armor, but burdened by its temperamental engine. In March 1944, the aircraft was shipped to Eagle Farm Airfield near Brisbane for evaluation. Technicians tinkered with the Ha-40, eventually discovering that the only real problem had been a failed magneto. With a replacement installed, the engine started. The Tony breathed again. Test flights began, and American pilots evaluated it against other captured Japanese fighters. They found it faster than the Zero in level flight and dives, with far better acceleration and far more effective armament. But it could not turn tightly. Its high wing loading punished any pilot who tried to dogfight like he was flying a lighter, more forgiving machine. It demanded discipline and energy management, traits that separated the skilled from the dead. The intelligence gleaned from this single aircraft influenced air combat training across the Pacific. Later that spring, the Ki-61 was repainted in American markings and given the test serial number XJ00003. Its sleek lines contrasted sharply with the bulky American fighters parked beside it. Test pilots flew it against Hellcats, Corsairs, P-40s, and P-38s, documenting where it excelled and where it was vulnerable. The results were clear. American naval fighters maintained decisive advantages at altitude, in durability, and in climb. The Tony held narrow performance edges in diving speed and firepower, but not enough to shift the balance of air superiority. In June 1944, the aircraft was disassembled again, shipped to the United States, reassembled at Naval Air Station Anacostia, and tested further. But on July 2, 1945, during a routine evaluation flight over North Carolina, the engine failed catastrophically. Metal fragments in the oil system revealed bearing deterioration, the same chronic flaw that had plagued the aircraft in wartime service. Manufacturer number 263, the fighter Captain Takichi abandoned 18 months earlier, crashed into the countryside and was destroyed. But by then, it had already given the Allies everything they needed. Takichi himself never knew what became of his aircraft. He returned to Rabaul on December 26 and resumed combat missions. 5 days earlier, on December 21, he had taken off from Borum Airfield on an escort mission protecting Ki-48 light bombers attacking American positions. The formation was intercepted by P-38 Lightnings. Takichi's Tony was hit repeatedly. Flames engulfed the aircraft. He did not bail out. His fighter crashed into the jungle near Hansa Bay. He died at 25, with 19 confirmed victories, one of the most skilled Ki-61 pilots Japan produced. His body was never recovered. Only one other pilot in the 68th Sentai matched his skill, Lieutenant Mitsuyoshi Tarui. The two began their careers in the small, agile Ki-27 and struggled at first with the heavier Tony. But they learned, adapting their tactics to emphasize speed, firepower, and slashing attacks. Tarui survived New Guinea, flew through the Philippines campaign, and ended the war with 23 confirmed kills, making him one of the highest-scoring Ki-61 pilots of all time. The 68th Sentai itself was crushed under the weight of attrition. Engine failures, shortages of spare parts, crippled supply chains, and constant combat losses turned once elite units into skeleton formations. By March 1944, the 68th had effectively ceased to exist. Its surviving pilots were scattered across other units or forced into ground combat roles as Japan's defensive perimeter unraveled. Yet the Ki-61 story did not end in New Guinea. Its final and most dramatic chapter unfolded over Japan itself as B-29 Superfortress bombers began appearing in the skies above Tokyo in late 1944. These enormous bombers flew at altitudes above 30,000 feet, out of reach for most Japanese fighters. The Ki-61, stripped of excess weight, was one of the few aircraft capable of reaching them. The 244th Sentai, based at Chofu Air Base near Tokyo, trained for months to intercept the invaders. Confronting the B-29 was like trying to punch a stone wall. Many attacks failed. Many pilots died. But the Japanese adapted. On November 7, 1944, the 10th Air Division authorized a radical tactic, ramming attacks. Pilots would deliberately collide with B-29s, preferably clipping a tail or wingtip, then bail out before their own aircraft disintegrated. These were not suicide missions in the strict sense. Many pilots survived. Some carried out the maneuver more than once. But the risk was immense. The 244th formed a special ramming unit called the Hagakure-tai, led by First Lieutenant Toru Shinomiya, a calm, disciplined 24-year-old who accepted the assignment knowing exactly what it meant. On December 3rd, he led a full scramble to intercept a formation of B-29s approaching Tokyo. His Ki-61 had been stripped of fuselage guns and armor to save every ounce of weight. At 32,000 feet, he dove toward a bomber from above, lined up on its vertical stabilizer, and struck it with his left wing. The tail ripped away. The B-29 entered a death spiral. Shinomiya's fighter lost much of its left wing, spinning wildly. He fought the controls until the aircraft leveled just enough for him to bail out. He parachuted into a rice field and survived with minor injuries. 2 other pilots rammed B-29s that day and also survived. Their damaged fighters were displayed in Tokyo as symbols of defiant resistance. Shinomiya and his comrades became the first recipients of the Bukosho, Japan's highest award for valor established late in the war. Through the winter, the 244th Sentai continued these attacks, claiming dozens of B-29s destroyed or damaged. Their claims were inflated, as all wartime claims tended to be, but even conservative estimates show the unit inflicted real losses on the superfortress formations. The Sentai's young commander, Captain Terahiko Kobayashi, became a national hero. He led from the front, flew in every engagement he could, and even conducted a ramming attack himself on January 27, 1945, surviving the bailout. He ended the war with 5 victories, 3 of them B-29s. Other pilots surpassed him in numbers. Captain Nagao Shirai was credited with 11 B-29s and 2 Hellcats. Captain Chuchi Ichikawa scored 9 bombers and 1 Hellcat. Lieutenant Shinomiya fought until he was killed during the battle for Okinawa in a conventional kamikaze attack. Their unit, the 244th, continued defending Tokyo into the final months of the war, even after beginning conversion to the improved Ki-100, which replaced the unreliable Ha-40 engine with a Mitsubishi radial. The Ki-100 was excellent, robust, balanced, reliable. But it came too late. On July 25, 1945, Kobayashi led his pilots into a low-altitude dogfight against attacking F-6F Hellcats despite orders to wait for incoming bombers. They claimed 10. The Americans lost 2. Kobayashi faced court-martial, but Emperor Hirohito himself expressed admiration, and the charges were dropped. Kobayashi survived the war, joined the post-war Japan Air Self-Defense Force, and flew F-86 Sabres until his death in 1957 at age 36. The ramming attacks, the desperate interception missions, the stripped-down fighters clawing for altitude, all reflected Japan's crumbling strategic position. The Ki-61, once a symbol of modern Japanese engineering, became an emblem of a war Japan could no longer sustain. Its engine problems symbolized the country's industrial limitations. Its scattered victories highlighted the skill of individual pilots trying to fill the widening gaps left by shrinking resources. By 1945, Japanese air power was shattered. Pilots who survived one mission wondered if they would fly again. Many didn't. The story of the Ki-61 is ultimately the story of Japan's air war in microcosm, a mix of brilliance and failure, courage and catastrophe. The Tony was never the best fighter in the world. It wasn't the fastest, the most maneuverable, or the most reliable. But it was Japan's attempt to build a modern, competitive fighter. In the hands of skilled men like Takechi, Tarui, and Kobayashi, it could be deadly. Yet no amount of individual skill could alter the overwhelming imbalance of production, technology, and strategy that defined the Pacific War. The aircraft Captain Takechi left behind at Cape Gloucester, manufacturer number 263, became a quiet symbol of all this. Captured intact, it opened a window into Japanese engineering. Tested relentlessly, it revealed strengths and fatal weaknesses. Destroyed by the very engine flaw that plagued it in wartime, it ended its life as it lived, struggling against forces larger than itself. Today, only a handful of Ki-61s remain in museums. None fly. Their aluminum skins are polished, their green paint touched up, their markings restored, but their engines remain silent. The men who flew them, the aces, the leaders, the young volunteers, are mostly gone. Yet the record of what they did survives. Takechi's 19 victories. Tarui's 23. Kobayashi's leadership and courage. The 244th Sentai's desperate home defense. The 9 Bukosho recipients who rammed bombers at the edge of the stratosphere. All of it forms a story not of triumph, but of endurance, the story of pilots who fought to the limits of their machines and beyond, often for a cause history would condemn, yet with a human courage that deserves to be remembered. Their legacy is complex, like the Ki-61 itself. It resists simple conclusions. And perhaps that is why it endures, as a reminder that even in the vast machinery of war, individual lives and individual choices still matter.